back with another episode of Remotely Speaking Up. And as you know, this is season 3. So today we have with us psychic life coach and serial entrepreneur and fellow digital nomad herself, Jamila White. And Jamila has started a very special community in Barbados called the Barbados Blackpats. And she's here to tell us more about that community, how it serves the community that they're in, and also how it serves her and the community of digital nomads. So thank you, Jamila, for joining us. And yeah, feel free to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Rochelle. I'm really happy to be here. Very excited. I'm Jamila White. I'm a psychic and life coach, Reiki master, and transformational retreat leader. And I've been in Barbados now about 1.5 years.
How's that 1.5 years been for you?
It's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing. I'm from the United States, Maryland, Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah.
And being in Barbados is a dream come true. This isn't something that just popped into my mind during the pandemic. This is something I've been actively working towards for 10 or 15 years. Didn't know how it would come about, when it would come about, but I began preparing probably as early as 2015, although I decided in 2010 I wanted to live here one day. 2015, I said, I'm going to start to make my business virtual, because one day I'm going to have the ability and the opportunity to live in the Caribbean, especially Barbados. And when that opportunity comes, I don't want to be like, oh, I can't go because of work. So I gradually began to make my practice more and more virtual. At the time, 2015, it was probably maybe 60% virtual. And then by the time the pandemic hit, it was already 95% virtual. So when the opportunity presented itself to move to Barbados, it was a very seamless transition for me work-wise, and no interruption to my work, to my finances, to any of that.
Usually when I speak to people who are working in Barbados remotely, they tend to say what pulled them there was the welcome stamp. And I know you yourself, you aren't a welcome stamper, but you were thinking about this way in advance. Why Barbados?
Well, I had visited twice as a tourist, loved it, and been all over the Caribbean, but I really love Barbados. And what stood out to me, my second visit, I had a friend here from school, from Howard University, and he's an American man married to a Bajan woman and was living here during my second visit. And we got to really hang out with him and his in-laws, with local Bajan family, with local Bajan friends, doing local Bajan people stuff. And that's when I really fell in love with it and said, oh my God, I think I could live. I want to live here. Like, this is amazing. The people are amazing, so hospitable, and just getting a glimpse of what it was like to live outside of the tourist bubble. And Barbados has such a strong infrastructure as far as technology and internet, and the kinds of things that would make me comfortable here, both living and also business-wise. That's when I started to say, I don't know how, but one day. And then I began to make my business more and more virtual. And then, although I'm not on the welcome stamp, that was the catalyst to put it back on the front burner. In that time between 2015 and 2020, when I moved, I asked to live on a sea island. Spirit sent me to St. Helena Island, South Carolina, on the coast of South Carolina in the US. And I was like, this isn't what I meant. The tiny rural population, my mom lives there. I was living off a dirt road for 18 months on a small sea island, but it gave me also some great preparation for moving to Barbados, because there's certain aspects of island life that are unanimous across all jurisdictions. From there, I went to New Orleans, Louisiana, and then briefly back to DC. And that's when the pandemic hit. And I was at home, like everybody else, just kind of miserable. In July of 2020, I heard about the welcome stamp, and I was like, maybe I'll get to Barbados after all. And I started looking into it. And was advised by some folks who were kind of knew the ins and outs of Barbados and immigration. Come see if you like it first, and then decide whether welcome stamp is for you and whether it applies to your situation.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Yeah, but that was also the catalyst for an organization, a network I accidentally started, now called Barbados Blackpats. Yeah. But it was that summer of July 2020 when Barbados announced the welcome stamp. And kind of to paint the picture, at that moment in time, only 3 or 4 countries in the world were open to people from the US to come to. So just for some perspective. And at that particular time, Barbados was the only one in the Caribbean. I think it was Barbados, Estonia, and some other places. And I was just like, wow. And so I posted it, shared it just on my personal Facebook page. And then as an afterthought, I came back and edited the caption and said, hey, you know, wouldn't it be cool if a bunch of us Black entrepreneurs, artists, teachers, and others who are working remotely, what if we kind of like knew each other just loosely so that when we got there, you would at least know one other person. Me being having no Bayesian heritage or no Bayesian roots, and my friends who were living in Barbados were now back in the States, and I didn't really know anybody here. And my experience as an introvert, a social introvert, but still an introvert, is when I had moved to New Orleans, Louisiana. I knew one person. I loved living there, but it took me about 5 or 6 months to make good friends. And I gave myself a 6-month trial for Barbados. And I was thinking, if it takes me 6 months to make friends, and my trial is for 6 months to decide if I want to live there long term, why would I want to, you know, wait until I'm on my way out the door before I actually know people? And so that was the conversation that started, and a handful of people, I mean, people I can count on one hand, hit me up in my DMs. It was like, hey, that looks interesting. And we started having a conversation about, okay, if we actually move to Barbados, like, what's the cost of living? Like the basics. What's the cost of living? What do we need to do? How do you get your stuff from the US to Barbados? And then we said, well, let's get in a Facebook group instead of these individual chats. And then I named the Facebook group, so are we moving to Barbados or not? And that was the beginning of what later became Barbados Blackpats, which has now had 700 people pass through. We have a Facebook group, we have a WhatsApp group. There's about 500 currently active in the network, which doesn't even represent the families that are now in Blackpats. So it went from that conversation to this thriving support that's here on the island. And a lot of people that come here come for Barbados, and then they become part of the community, and then they stay longer than they were going to stay initially, or they come back because of the community connections.
Yeah, I like that. Because I never really thought about that, the impact that it actually has in terms of creating that welcoming atmosphere, but also encouraging people to stay longer rather than it being a network that just serves people as they're on the island. So I really like that. And I know I'm a member of this group, as you know already, and I've seen just how people plug right in. They come to Barbados, they say their names and whatnot, they plug right in, and it's like having a whole family on the island, just like
Absolutely. That. Literally, people in this group have become my family away from home. And then literally in the midst of that, an actual family member, my sister, moved down here because she saw what was happening with Blackpats. She said she was going to come for 3 months. Over a year later, she's still here, although she's planning to go back this week. We'll see if she actually stays away. You know, a lot of people say that they came here for a reason, like to work remotely in a beautiful location, but then having this network that welcomes you from the day you get here. And actually before you get here, a lot of people connect with us knowing that they're coming here, and they start creating relationships through our online groups. So literally when their plane touches down, they're going to happy hour that same day or that next day because they met someone, you know, through the group. And the power of community is so often underestimated, but it really does make the difference between whether you're just a professional working in a pretty location versus whether you actually have friends, relationships, and not just friends within Blackpats, but the other expats in the community are often your first friends, but they often become a bridge to making local relationships. Because I want to be clear that we're not just here living in a bubble where we're only dealing with other expats or only other Black expats, you know, from the US, the UK, Canada, wherever, but that it often is a soft place to land, and then you branch out from there, and people in Blackpats then introduce you to friends and business connections on the island, and then that become your friends and business connections. So it isn't just this, we're an isolated group, but we do have unique needs as expats, and we have unique needs as Black expats, in terms of having a safe space, but also finding resources that are relevant to us and our culture and even our physicality, things like, oh, where do I find a wax technician who can work with kinky body hair? It's little stuff like that that we can't always find easily in a larger expat group, because there are many that are on the island. So, and we also, stay connected to the local community. There have been times when we have done community service projects. And for example, after the hurricane last summer, Blackpats got together and helped do a cleanup at Andromeda Garden out on the East Coast, a beautiful botanical garden that really had been damaged pretty severely during the hurricane. And there are other projects, both individually and collectively, that people are doing to give back to this community that has given so much to us, to this beautiful island and the people here.
Yeah. Do you find that the locals are really aware of the impact that you have? Because I find sometimes expat groups, they tend to exist a bit invisible in the locations they go to. I mean, they're visible and clear in the sense that I think people are aware that they're on the island, but they're perceived almost still sometimes in that tourist bubble, rather than persons you've seen almost like coming to have a good time, rather than persons that are wanting to give back and contribute. So do you find that that your presence is felt locally, or there's that visibility around the group?
Well, I can't say that we're a household name, but I am constantly amazed at how often the local community has said, oh, we know about Blackpats, we've heard about Blackpats. We were written up in the local newspaper, in the Nation newspaper, when we did the cleanup. But even before then, we would have instances, especially with venues, cab drivers who not only know about Blackpats, but when they see other Black expats and long-term visitors, will tell them about us. Recently, in January, I had two friends returning to Barbados from the States, and on their taxi ride in, the driver saying, oh, you need to get in touch with the people from Blackpats, and let me give you Jamila's number. It turned out, of course, they were my friends, and they had a good laugh. They're like, we know Jamila, we've gone to college with her, we've known her for over 20 years. And, we had a great laugh. But for me, that really, really just filled up my heart, because it says that not only do people know about us or starting to know about us, but they know enough about our network to tell people not just that we exist, but they recommend us to other Blackpats. We've had a really great reputation on the island with venues, with individual service providers, because not only are we a network, but we are a positive group. We're a group that will come in, we'll spend our money at your venue, and we'll treat your venue and your employees with respect. And so then people are saying, well, yeah, we like that Blackpats group. Or when they meet people from Blackpats, like, oh, we really like your group. And they're telling other people around about us. Overall, I've found that in Barbados, the mindset and the culture of Barbados is very welcoming to guests as a whole. But there was an adjustment period, because what I found is that local Bajans were used to kind of two groups of visitors: the short-term tourists that were here for a week or maybe a month max, and then expats who were here for years and years and years. And with the pandemic and the welcome stamp, there was this hybrid of people who were here for a different length of time in the middle, for 6 months, for a year and a half. And so at times, people and businesses didn't always know what to do with us, because sometimes in tourist locations, not just Barbados, not just the Caribbean, but I lived in a tourist location in the US, the mentality can be get the money quick because you're not going to see this person again, versus create a relationship with this person. And so that is something that we've dealt with and are dealing with on an ongoing basis. Like, yeah, we're here and you're going to see us again next week and next month, and you're going to see us again in the fall. So let's create a relationship. And sometimes I would say we're met with resistance, but it's kind of a curiosity, like, well, what do you mean? Yeah. Oh, so you live here now. And so for a lot of our members, it's like, well, no, I don't really live here, but I'm here. Well, how long are you here for? Indefinitely? How long have you been here? A year, 6 months, 9 months? So they don't always know what to do with us, because we don't fit into the traditional category of visitor. So that's something that's interesting, that's kind of come up or comes up repeatedly, is, not knowing what to do with us. And initially not always wanting to create real friendships because, oh, well, you're going to be gone next month. And I don't want to keep making friends, you know, who are going to be leaving us on the island in a couple months when you get bored. But that's really starting to change because so many of us have been here more than a year. And many of us are also looking to put down roots in terms of long-term permanent visitor status. People are looking at getting their citizenship, especially if they have Bayesian roots. People are looking at buying property and becoming real fixtures and parts of the Barbados landscape and not just kind of passing through. So that's something that's changing. And I'm really excited about that as well.
Yeah, you're very much right in that. It's really a learning curve, I think, as you mentioned, for the island, for a lot of institutions on the island, because when you've been catering all those years to one type of tourist, and then suddenly in a year, you've got an influx of a new type of tourists who have more long-term plans as well, right. Then it becomes, well, how do you sort of reinvent your systems or actually create something additional to accommodate this group? So I guess that's an ongoing dialogue.
Absolutely. And that's something that I'm very interested in hearing more about from the Barbados government, because there's been some talk about creating a pathway to citizenship for people who've been on the welcome stamp visa, which is the visa for remote workers who are here 6 months to a year, but it's renewable after a year. But nothing has come forward from that yet, but there is a lot of interest among the expat community, especially in Blackpats, about dual citizenship with Barbados in their home country. There are a number of Barbadians who are in our network who may have had Bayesian roots and are eligible for dual citizenship already, but because they've been on the welcome stamp or have been here for a longer period of time, they hadn't considered that before, and now they're considering it. The feeling that I get also is that the government of Barbados and the people of Barbados are very interested in us continuing to be here because the expat dollar, the welcome stamp dollar, really travels pretty wide on the island versus a short-term visitor. They're seeing not just the exchange of culture and the hospitality, but they're seeing the benefit of the financial investment of people who are making their money elsewhere, therefore preserving jobs for Bayesians, but spending their money here on a long-term basis. It's different when you are paying rent on a monthly basis, you're paying utilities, you're renting a car, and you're doing other activities versus I'm just here for a week or two or maybe a month paying this much money versus I'm actually spending the majority of my income here on the island for a year or longer. Now we're seeing people in that welcome stamp renewal now that it's past its first full year and now is well into its second year. Yeah, coming up in the third year.
Absolutely, and that's amazing because, and I'm sure everyone will probably be really happy to hear as well the contribution, because I don't think people think about the long-term impact of tourism, and we've never had to think about the long-term impact of tourism before, or of remote workers. If anything, I've been to a lot of countries while studying remote work and digital nomadism, where sometimes the digital nomad is seen as an annoyance because they're seen as someone that comes to enjoy the island, party, just have a good time and leave. But then when you look at it from this long-term basis, your impact goes a lot wider than that.
Right, and I think there are, I don't disagree that that's an issue within the broader digital nomad community, because that does happen. But I think that people are starting to realize that the digital nomad community is very diverse in terms of lifestyle, whereas this wasn't true before for everyone, but there were a lot of people where the digital nomads were considered to be 20-somethings who had no family ties. They recent college graduates, now they have a job and they can work remotely. So they just go everywhere and party, and every month or every 2 months they move to another country. And while that part of the community does still exist as far as digital nomads, what I think the pandemic and specifically the welcome stamp visa did for Barbados was show that there are whole families that came here on the welcome stamp visa. There are single moms with children. There are whole families, mother, father, grandfather, kids, 3 generations that have come here under that. There are retirees who have come here. There are singles who have come here, couples without children who have come here. So you know, it goes, you know, runs the gamut, and the people are seeing that it's not just the partiers, although, you know, we probably have a handful of those even within Blackpats, but the majority of Blackpats, and I don't know what the data shows for the welcome stamp, but based anecdotally, based on what I'm seeing, having been here a year and a half, most of the people here for the longer term are fairly responsible adults who may have started just wanting to quote work in paradise because that's what the welcome stamp sold, but then really fell in love with the island and saying either I want to put down roots here or I want to be able to go back and forth between Barbados and my home country. But it created these long-term relationships with people who are, you know, not just looking to party. But, you know, also Barbados knows how to party too. So that is what you're looking for. You know, there are parties to be had if that's what you want. There's such a wide variety of experiences here on the island. You know, but there's a quieter side of Barbados. And then there are people who are here just living their everyday life, but within this beautiful container called Barbados and within the Barbados community. So yeah, but I think the word digital nomad is really evolving as people begin to see that there are so many different types of nomads. And there have been layers. Yeah, and there have been people here who are the kind of digital nomads that don't have a permanent other country that they want to be in, but are doing 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year in one country, then moving on to another country. And we've had several of those people in Blackpats as well. Some that have gone on to other countries and some that left, went to other countries like Barbados better and came back. So, you know, it's really a diverse group of people who have come here for a very diverse set of reasons.
So what do you think then that governments and institutions can do then to serve those various communities with multifaceted needs? Because I think, as you've said, often digital nomads and welcome stampers are seen as one group of people rather than actually this very diverse population. So what would be the first advice that you would give to governments or tourism bodies that are trying to serve these groups?
The first is make it a welcoming space for someone who isn't just coming for a couple of weeks. And what that might look like is working with landlords and property managers to educate them on the difference between a long-term visitor and an expat versus a short-term tourist. And that might mean making residential spaces attractive by having maybe the second bedroom is an office, or there's something other than a dining room table to work at, and also having things in place that protect both landlords and tenants in the event of a dispute. Because in a lot of not just in Barbados, but in other communities, what I'm hearing in the expat community is that it's not widespread, but there are too many shady landlords that kind of do a bait and switch and advertise a property as one thing, and then when you get there, it's something else. So having some accountability as far as housing is concerned, and maybe even having a resource where it's easier to find medium-term housing. So something that's more than a 1 month Airbnb, but doesn't necessarily require the firm commitment of a 1 year lease for people who have 6 months, or people who may, which is very common in the nomad community, maybe working remotely with an employer that doesn't have a fixed schedule on when they have to come back to work in the office. So they may need some flexibility of, I don't know if I'm going to be here 6 months, a year, or 18 months. It depends on my job. So they can't say I'm going to sign a 1 year lease because they don't want to be penalized if they're called back to work. So having some flexibility there. The other thing that I think would be very attractive to the expat community is having some long-term options. What do you do after that first year when you've decided, I really want to stay here? What are my options now? Is there a path to citizenship, or is there some other kind of visa program for long-term or quote permanent non-citizen residents? Or is there a way to expand or extend or renew the remote work visa if a country has that kind of situation? So people want to know, okay, even if I'm not ready to make that leap right now, what are the steps so that I can start preparing for what I may do a year from now or 3 years from now? I don't just want to be on permanent tourist status, which is what a lot of people are doing, including myself, where you're on the island for a period of time, you leave and you come back every couple of months to stay within your visa requirements. You know, you're not working here. So there needs to be some other option, because the welcome stamp is an amazing innovation, but it doesn't fit every circumstance. It probably fits the needs of maybe about 80% of the people in my group. But then there's another group where it doesn't quite fit their needs because their timing is unsure, or they actually want to go beyond the welcome stamp and into how do I get beyond, you know, visiting remote visa status.
Yeah, that's such excellent advice. And I can see, I really hope that in our audience, we have those persons that are listening. And I know that you're very plugged into the local society as well. So I hope that your group in communicating that will have an impact. You're so right. I think there's still a lot more to be done, but you're very right. It's a good first step in this sort of new road and a new form of tourism. So I really hope to see the expansion of it, like a suite of, I've spoken before about a suite of welcome stamps that suits the need of different persons rather than just one welcome stamp. So really hoping to see.
Yeah, if there's one thing I can add, and this isn't specific again just to Barbados, but to a lot of governments in the Caribbean, what I'm hearing within the expat community is if you ask about immigration procedures or long-term resident procedures, you get different answers depending on who you talk to that day. So having some consistent, centralized information about what the process is, what the requirements are for various situations would be very helpful. So for an expat, you know, they call one day, they talk to one person, they get one answer, then they go into the office and meet with someone, they get either a slightly different or a very different answer or very different process. So some standardization there would be very helpful, even in this changing landscape.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that's a problem that's experienced in other areas on the island as well. And it's kind of something that is a sort of characteristic of island life as well. So I think it's definitely an area that we can more streamline. But thank you so much, Jamila. Thank you for all the wealth of information that you shared on this episode. And I'm going to make sure that this information gets far and wide, because Barbados as a country, as you know, is very innovative. The government has very open ears and they're always willing to listen and improve. And I hope to see that improvement, because it will serve not only the expat community, the remote working community, but it will also serve the Barbadian community. And you guys have done a really good job at that as well.
Thank you so much. My goal is that this becomes a win-win situation. I have totally fallen in love with Barbados, and I like to share that love with people and tell them, you know, you don't have to commit to a long term, but just come visit and see if you like it. And if you like it, come back and keep coming back and stay a little longer next time.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jamila. And
thank you, Michelle.
I'm gonna just wrap up really quickly, but maybe before we go, would you like to share your funniest remote work story with us?
Oh my goodness. Like many remote workers, I spend a lot of time on Zoom. And so I meet with all of my clients who are all over the world. I meet with them usually through video on Zoom. I also teach my classes on energy management for energy sensitive people. And so I'm on a private one-on-one session with a client, and it's a little emotionally intense because that's often the nature of my work. And there were mosquitoes just coming out of nowhere. All of a sudden, like 3 or 4 or 5 mosquitoes are all flying around. So I had to put my client on hold to manage the mosquitoes. And I have this electric mosquito racket. Looks like a little tennis racket, but it's electric and it electrocutes them. And I thought I turned the video off, and I'm swinging and killing the mosquitoes and zapping them. And then she just starts laughing hysterically. And I realized the video was still on, and she's watching me just, you know, batting away at these insects. And we both had a good laugh about it. And I had to explain that, you know, living in a tropical environment has its benefits, but the downside every once in a while is the bugs. It's a lot of bugs on this island.
You're using the electric racket. That's a different type of energy management.
It's a whole different kind of energy management. And, you know, it's become a bit of a pastime for me. I enjoy shocking the heck out of these mosquitoes. So I'm grinning and, you know, I'm just going to town with this racket.
Your weekly tennis game.
Yeah, like, you know, take that. She enjoyed that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Jamila. Thank you for joining our podcast, Remotely Speaking Up. And how can our audiences get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me on my website at www.inspiredjamila, INSPIRED, Jamila, JAMILA.com, or on social media, Facebook and Instagram, also Jamila White, Inspired Jamila.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And if our audiences would like to know more about remote working or how you can engage with the remote working or digital nomad community, or just how you can better form stronger relationships with your online workers, then feel free to get in touch. Contact at crowdpotential.co.uk. Thank you for joining us for another week, and take care. We'll see you next week. And this is another episode of Remotely Speaking Up. Bye.